As a bank that focuses on business, we work with business leaders all day, every day. We have a front row seat to what's working and what has potential. The First Business Bank podcast is dedicated to sharing insights to help you work better, smarter, and faster to achieve your goals. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to the First Business Bank podcast. I'm Brendan Freeman, President of Private Wealth for First Business Bank. Today, we're going to talk about DIY, do it yourself. Does it make sense for investing? And further, does it make sense for estate planning? With me in this discussion, we've invited Nancy John Shoy, Portfolio Manager and Market Strategist, as well Christine Waldschmidt, Trust Advisor. Let's take a moment and have them introduce themselves.
I'll go first, Brendan. I'm Nancy John Shoy. I'm a Senior Vice President with First Business Bank Private Wealth, and I work directly with clients to manage their investment assets. I'm part of the investment team here at First Business, and I also do a fair bit of our communication, both written and in person, regarding our investment strategy and outlook.
You do a great job, Nancy. Thank you. Christine?
I'm Christine Waldschmidt. I'm an attorney and trust advisor in our Kansas City market. I have a background in estate planning and trust administration, among other things.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so glad you're both with me today. Let's jump right into the conversation. Let's talk about DIY. When does it make sense and when might it be appropriate for individuals to think about doing it yourself? Let's start from an investment perspective with Nancy.
Yeah, Brendan, one of the areas I feel like it makes sense for do-it-yourself and is really set up to facilitate that is with individuals' 401ks. Because the 401k industry has done a really nice job, I think, of providing the basic tools and resources for plan participants to make good long-term decisions. Of course, in your retirement account, taxes aren't an issue, so you don't have to worry about that level of complexity. And your goals are usually pretty straightforward, maximizing the value of your plan, targeting your retirement date. So I think that most 401k platforms also provide kind of a basic tool for investors to see if they're on track to meet their goals for retirement based on how much they're contributing and the way their portfolios are invested. So that's an area where it really does make sense and the tools and resources are there.
You're right. There are a lot of calculators out there that individuals can take advantage of and plug in different scenarios and kind of say, what if, right? How about from a estate planning perspective, Christine? When would it make sense for individuals to think about estate planning on their own and kind of this DIY approach?
I think estate planning is a little trickier. There's so much complexity and so many legal aspects. And not to be flip, but truly, if you are an estate planning attorney, I think you are well suited to DIY.
Sure.
And beyond that, though, if there's a situation where there are really very few or no assets to deal with, you can probably try to do some DIY and figure out some simple ways to transfer assets. And honestly, if you do not care what happens when you're gone, if you do not have beneficiaries you're trying to provide for. That's not most people, though. So I think DIY is rarely the best option with estate planning.
So in terms of this, is this like a handwritten will, that kind of thing? When there maybe might not be much to account for and might not be much to transfer. And so, maybe it makes sense. And you used to hear about that kind of thing, but is that what we're talking about?
Well, holographic wills are probably more a thing of the past and can be challenging to probate. Thing about whether or not someone has a will and the probate process. Probate is what happens if you own assets in your individual name at the time of your death. If you have a will, that will be probated. The court will look at the terms of the will and the property will be distributed according to those terms. If you don't have a will, the state has made one for you. They're intestacy statutes. And those intestacy statutes typically provide for disposition in a way that most people would choose. They provide If you're married and have children, that half goes to the spouse, half goes to the children typically. There's state laws, so they differ state to state. Many people from a DIY standpoint feel that they can accomplish their estate planning goals by how they title their assets. And there are some things you can do with titling and joint tenancy with right of survivorship, and also with transfer on death designations. And utilized properly, these can be effective tools, particularly if you have a very simple situation, such as a surviving spouse with one child left, and they know that everything is just going to that child. They might do transfer on death designations to that child, and it's an adult child that is competent. Things might transfer in a pretty straightforward manner.
Okay. So admittedly, there's situations, if it's fairly simple, if it's pretty straightforward, where it might make sense, especially from an estate planning perspective. And Nancy, as you mentioned, on the 401k side, there's just a lot of great tools that are available. And so, okay, that all makes sense. What about, let's talk about the opposite. We love talking about when things might go wrong and there's situations where there's a downside. What can we learn from some of the mistakes of DIYers from the past, and what are some of the pitfalls, I guess, of DIY, particularly in terms of estate planning, Christine? You gave some good examples of how it might work, but what are some of the pitfalls, and where can you go wrong from an estate planning perspective?
There are many ways you can go wrong.
Okay.
With joint tenancy, okay. Many people might think, you know what, I'm just going to put my child on this account. We'll be joint tenants. They can pay bills if I'm not able to, and then everything will go to them when I'm gone. It might work out that way. But the thing you have to remember when you put someone on an account in joint tenancy, that is a present gift. So if you have a large estate, you may need to think about gift tax ramifications. But if not, you have the issue that you've transferred ownership. So those assets are now subject to that child's creditors, possibly a bad acting spouse, a divorce situation. You've exposed those assets to liabilities that may be really beyond your control. The transfer on death designation certainly prevents some of that because the ownership does not transfer until death. One of the biggest problems I've seen with people doing their estate planning via transfer on death designation is if they have more than one child and they have grandchildren, in a situation where you have two children named as transfer on death beneficiaries and one predeceases, their children may be cut out completely. So there are some real dangers there that people don't necessarily think about.
Can I ask a question? Because I think that even when people have had professional help putting their estate plan together, it seems to me that where they're sometimes left on their own to DIY is to follow through with the retitling of their assets. And a lot of times, don't we see that people have not done that, and that major assets like a house are not titled appropriately?
I see that all the time. And it is very sad, particularly when people have spent thousands of dollars on estate planning and they've got this beautiful trust created. The thing you've got to remember about a trust only governs assets that are in the trust. So if the trust is not funded, if you don't transfer ownership of the assets into the trust becomes just an empty piece of paper. Now, typically with a trust, people will have as a backstop a pour-over will. And this is a will that can be probated that says anything I forgot to put in the trust, go ahead and put it in the trust. It pours the probate assets into the trust. Well, this is a bit of a stopgap, and it does get you to the trust and the disposition you wanted under the trust. You've now put your whole family through the expense and the time of probate, which is what you were trying to avoid by having a trust. And many people, it is the desire thinking that they will save money. They don't want to pay the attorney additional money at an hourly rate, perhaps, to help them see through the funding of the trust. And then it just doesn't happen. And it ultimately can cost the family thousands in legal fees going through probate.
not to mention headache and concern and that kind of thing. So there's a lot you really need to think through the different scenarios and play it out. Thank you, Christine. There's a lot more to that, I'm sure. Nancy, how about where things might go wrong from an investment perspective? What are some of the pitfalls of the DIY approach from an investment perspective?
Yeah, Brendan, I think the number one thing that we see when people are making their own decisions is that they try to time the market. Mm-hmm. Many times investors let emotional decisions cause them to either have too much risk or too little risk in their portfolio. It's fairly common, too, for investors kind of chase last year's big returns or sort of cocktail party ideas. And a lot of times they don't realize that the environment that made those attractive returns possible no longer exists. So, I mean, from my personal experience of 38 years, I can say that investment management is a pretty full-time occupation. It takes a lot of time to remain well-informed and make solid investment decisions. And busy professionals really just don't have that kind of time to stay on top of the market in a way that allow them to make good decisions all the time.
Right. Yeah, they might not have the time. They might not have the training really to know what to look for, right?
That's right.
Can you give me some examples? You mentioned many years of experience that you've been doing this and working with clients. Can you give examples of where it's gone wrong?
Well, I can give you a great example looking at historical returns and what happens if you make a misstep and you're out of the market for just some of the good days. I'll give you a little bit of math here. You're looking at a period, I've done some work around this. Let's take January of 1995 through the end of January of 2022. So a little over 26 years or, about 6,800 trading days. So the market over that period of time, and by the market, I just mean the S&P 500, has generated an average annual return of 8.8%. So you're in the market, you're not in and out, you make an 8.8% average annual return. If you missed just the best 5 days in that 26 years over 6,800 trading sessions, your average return drops from 8.8% a year to only 7% a year. And to give you the dollars behind that, $100,000 for 26 years at 8.8% becomes $896, almost $900,000 at 8.8%. A 7% return would yield a portfolio worth $580,000.
Wow.
So $316,000 less because you missed just 5 days. And that's because a lot of the really good days and the really bad days come in clusters. So, I looked at this, and out of those 50 best and worst days, 8 of the best days and 8 of the worst days were within a 7-week period right around the pandemic. So that's kind of that if you made a decision after the market dropped to step out, very likely you would have missed those strong rebound days that made a big difference. If you missed 25 of the best days in all those 26 years, your return drops to only 2.8% a year.
Wow.
So not to say that returns can't be enhanced by correctly interpreting changes in environment and either adding, adjusting your risk in the portfolio. That certainly is highly beneficial and a part of what we do in our investment management process. But sometimes buying at the right times feels a little bit like running into a burning building.
You have to have that discipline, that knowledge, that fortitude to kind of keep the long-term approach. And a lot of times individuals, do-it-yourselfers, don't have that. Wow, those are some incredible numbers. Real money there at stake. And so kind of having that guidance along the way, I'm sure has really helped a lot of our clients. And it's a scary situation when you think about those real dollars lost. Christine, how about from your perspective, kind of thinking back on estate planning here and examples of where it went wrong? Do you have anything come to mind there?
The most common example of things that go wrong, it's because it's a very common situation. Again, when people have, someone has more than one child, so they're siblings, and they feel that they can save money by, doing the DIY, and we're just going to put one child on the account as a joint tenant, and they will take care of paying bills. They will take care of final expenses. And then when everything's settled, they'll divvy the assets among the siblings evenly. That doesn't always happen. And it's unfortunate, but death can bring out the worst in some families. And it's so sad to see people that are already going through a grieving process. And then because things were left in a bit of an unsettled manner, or a trust everybody to figure it out and do the right thing, then you end up seeing this really unfortunate conflict among siblings at a time when they should be able to come together in their grief and not have to worry about the money. So unfortunately, that's probably the most common thing I've seen.
Really can bring out the worst of people, which was probably not the intent of the original parents or grantors, right? Well, great discussions, kind of gives us a perspective of the pitfalls and that kind of thing. I'm curious, is it all or nothing? I mean, are there hybrid situations where it might make sense to do a little bit of do-it-yourself and a little bit of advice? Are there computer-based options? You hear about some of these, particularly I guess on the investment side of things. Nancy, for cost-conscious individuals that are maybe looking to save some dollars, are there ways to save money here? What are your thoughts? I mean, are there options?
Yep. Brendan, there are a lot of options out there today for investors, and certainly not everyone needs a professional investment management firm. And if you're one of those folks who has a very straightforward situation, or you're comfortable doing it yourself, there are a lot of low-cost providers, kind of robo providers, discount brokerage firms, more full-service brokerage firms for people who are comfortable making their own decisions. But what I find is a lot of times people focus on cost and on having the lowest fee without really understanding necessarily what the total picture of their fees are, or what they're getting for that fee. And I'll use First Business as an example. We have a wealth management team of professionals. So if it's important to you to work with a team that knows you, knows your family, understands your goals and what you're trying to achieve, that you can pick up the phone and call us, or that we'll pick up the phone and call you, that's important to you, then that's something that a professional wealth management firm provides. And we have on our teams a trust advisor like Christine, who is very fully versed in estate planning techniques and can help you understand if your estate currently does exactly what you think it's going to do and meets your objectives in terms of passing wealth along to your heirs. Help with a financial plan to make sure that you understand what your future goals are and what it's going to take from an investment management standpoint to get there and meet those goals. We have wealth advisors who can help you with anything that you need from the borrowing or depository side and personal side of your equation. So we really bring so much more to the table, and really for a fee that I have found to be very highly competitive with almost any other option.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I know we do, and so that makes a lot of sense. And there are ways to even save money within an investment management approach, and in terms of the underlying investments that you choose and that kind of thing. Christine, I've been thinking about this throughout our discussion. You hear about LegalZoom and different online options and things like that. How about for those cost-conscious potential estate planning do-it-yourselfers? Are there ways out there that, particularly if you're feeling like your situation's not overly complex, that you can try to get it done, or what's your thought there?
Well, I think that there are certain people that may be able to go online and buy forms and carefully read those forms and hopefully understand what all the terms and provisions mean and fill them out and execute them. But most people are not experts to really understand what all the terms mean. There's just such a huge margin for error, and there's so much at stake. And I think what people truly do not realize is the idea that they could save a few hundred or a few $1,000s up front by trying to figure out how to do this themselves. They may very well end up costing their family thousands and thousands of dollars after the fact, cleaning up the mess. So it's not worth the risk, in my opinion. Again, unless if you're an estate planning attorney and you're comfortable drafting your own documents, and those are pretty limited situations, though. So sure. I see a lot of danger, because people will spend $500 on these LegalZoom documents, print, fill in a few blanks, sign, and they truly believe they have completed their estate planning. There's a lot of danger there, I think. Sure.
Well, oftentimes it's not everyone's favorite topic, right? Talking about planning for your death or your passing. I definitely hear you that it's just worth really giving it thoughtful time. Really trying to do it the right way. Last question for both of you, and really starting with Christine. What resources are out there for our listeners that are tuning in today? If they're unsure, what advice would you give them as to who to talk to and kind of where to go from here? Christine?
Well, from an estate planning standpoint, I think it's always important to get good referrals for estate planning attorneys. So if you have friends or family members that have had a good experience using an attorney or a particular firm for estate planning, I think getting a referral is always a good place to start. I would absolutely recommend going to your bank trust department. First Business Bank Private Wealth, one of the things we do is connect our clients with estate planning attorneys. And these are attorneys that we've worked with and known for years, some of them decades, and we're familiar with their levels of expertise, their particular skill sets. We can really match up the client with the right attorney. Not everyone needs a $600 an hour guru that can do the best and brightest and ahead of the curve, charitable gift tax planning, estate tax planning trusts. Some people, but if you do need that, you want to know who to go to.
Sure.
Some people need just a more basic service, and we know how to match the client and the attorney up. So I feel like we are a very good source for that referral.
That's great. Yeah, I think it is about kind of having trust and making sure that you're connected with someone that can really help you in your situation. And if you're unsure, going to friends, family, trust company, First Business Bank, it's good advice. So how about on the investment side, Nancy? I mean, if you're unsure, what resources are out there? And obviously First Business Bank could help in this way, but what other thoughts might you have there?
Well, there's a ton of information out there. I think one important thing is to get your information from a wide range of sources. Sometimes if you're only looking at one particular source, just like watching one news station, you're maybe going to get a little bit of a lopsided view. So get your news from a variety of different sources. I would say I think First Business has done a good job at our website, firstbusiness.bank, with podcasts like this, with podcasts on retirement planning, information for business owners, just a wide variety of topics that are informational. Our quarterly market review is on our website under the resources tab, as well as comments about things like market volatility and inflation. So I think we've done a good job. I think a lot of organizations work very hard to provide timely information and good, solid information for decision making for clients.
What a wonderful way to cap it off. Thank you. Great insight from both of you ladies. I want to thank you, Nancy Johnshoy, Christine Waldschmidt, for being part of this conversation today. For our audience that participated and listened with us today, I hope you found this helpful and informative. As Nancy had just mentioned, if you're looking for more information from us, please visit firstbusiness.bank. A ton of great information out there. And we encourage you, if you're a business owner, if you're an investor, if a topic like this seems relevant to you, please look into those resources. We invite you to experience the advantage of First Business Bank. And if there's any way that we can help you, any of our team members, please reach out to us. Thank you for listening.
If you want more content like what you just heard delivered straight to your inbox, go to firstbusinessbankpodcast.com. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the First Business Bank podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave a quick rating of the show. Thanks so much for listening.